Imagine racing a tortoise. You're Achilles, fastest warrior in Greece, absolute athletic monster. The tortoise is, well, a tortoise, so obviously you win, right? According to an ancient Greek philosopher named Zeno of Elea, you literally never catch it. Ever. Not because you're slow, but because motion itself might actually be impossible. Which sounds less like philosophy and more like somebody getting stuck in a loading screen forever. But weirdly enough, his argument is so logical that people are still debating it over 2,000 years later. Zeno of Elea was a student of Parmenides, the philosopher who believed reality never changes. According to Parmenides, movement, change, and motion are all illusions. Now, most people probably responded to this idea by doing something simple, like walking across the room. But Zeno decided to defend his teacher using pure logic. And honestly, he became one of the greatest professional troublemakers in philosophy history. Instead of arguing normally, Zeno created paradoxes, little logical traps designed to break your brain. And the scary part is, they actually work. Even modern mathematicians still talk about them. Before we get into the famous tortoise race, we need to understand what a paradox actually is. A paradox is an argument that seems logically correct, but leads to a completely ridiculous conclusion. Basically, your brain says, wait, that can't be right. But logic says, yeah, but technically. It's like when someone online wins an argument with perfect logic and you still feel emotionally attacked afterward. That's a paradox. Zeno used paradoxes as weapons. His goal wasn't just to confuse people for fun. Okay, maybe a little. But mainly he wanted to protect the philosophy of Parmenides. Remember, Parmenides believed reality was one eternal, unchanging thing. So Zeno tried to prove motion itself was impossible. Not difficult, not rare, impossible. And he did it using nothing but reasoning. No science labs, no equations, no TikTok explainers with dramatic music, just logic. Let's start with Zeno's dichotomy paradox. Sounds complicated, but it's actually horrifyingly simple. Imagine walking across a room. To reach the other side, you first need to walk halfway there. Makes sense. But before reaching halfway, you need to walk half of that distance. And before that, half again, and again, and again, forever. So according to Zeno, moving anywhere requires completing an infinite number of tiny steps, and completing infinitely many tasks should take infinite time. Which means, you should never actually arrive anywhere. Ever. Technically, you should still be trying to leave your bed this morning, which honestly explains some Mondays pretty well. But this paradox is disturbing because the logic feels weirdly solid. You can divide distances infinitely. There's always another halfway point. So why doesn't movement break reality? That question bothered philosophers and mathematicians for centuries. Now comes Zeno's most famous paradox, the race between Achilles and a tortoise. Zeno says, imagine Achilles races a tortoise. To make things fair, the tortoise gets a small head start. Simple enough. Now Achilles begins running. Fast. Very fast. Anime speed fast. But by the time Achilles reaches the tortoise's starting point, the tortoise has moved slightly ahead. Then Achilles reaches that point. But the tortoise has moved again. Every single time Achilles catches up to where the tortoise was, the tortoise has already moved a little farther, so Achilles can reduce the gap forever, but never fully eliminate it. Meaning, the tortoise can never actually be overtaken, which is completely absurd. Obviously, Achilles wins in real life. A tortoise is not beating Greece's greatest warrior unless something has gone catastrophically wrong. But again, the logic feels strangely convincing. That's what makes Zeno terrifying. He takes normal reality and turns it into a math horror story. Then Zeno somehow made things even worse. He looked at a flying arrow and said, that arrow is not moving. Now at this point, people were probably exhausted, but Zeno continued. He argued that time is made up of individual instants, tiny frozen moments, and during any single instant, the arrow occupies one specific position in space. It's just there, not moving, because movement would require changing position during the instant. But an instant has no duration, so during every single instant, the arrow is motionless. And if time is made entirely of these frozen instants, then motion never actually happens. The arrow only appears to move. Honestly, this feels like the philosophical version of pausing a video and claiming movies don't exist. But again, it's difficult to immediately explain why the argument fails. That's why Zeno became legendary. Now here's the important part. Zeno probably didn't literally believe tortoises were unbeatable. His paradoxes were designed to expose weaknesses in ordinary thinking. This style of argument is called reductio ad absurdum. Basically, you take someone's idea, follow it logically, and show it leads to something absurd. It's like saying, oh, you think motion makes sense? Cool. Then explain why Achilles can't catch a turtle. And honestly, that's kind of genius. His paradoxes forced people to think more carefully about infinity, time, space, motion, mathematics. In fact, these paradoxes helped inspire later developments in calculus. Yes, the thing that traumatized millions of students in school. So in a weird way, Zeno helped create math homework, a truly historic villain origin story. Today, mathematicians usually explain Zeno's paradoxes using calculus and infinite series. The basic idea is this: an infinite number of smaller distances can still add up to a finite total. For example, 1/2 plus 1/4 plus 1/8 plus 1/16 goes on forever, but approaches a limit. So even though Achilles crosses infinitely many smaller gaps, the total distance remains finite. Problem solved, mostly, because philosophers still debate whether this completely answers Zeno's deeper questions about motion and infinity. Even the philosopher Bertrand Russell called Zeno's paradoxes immeasurably subtle and profound, which is philosopher language for, this guy seriously messed with our brains. So here's the strange legacy of Zeno of Elea. He used pure logic to argue that motion is impossible. Walking, running, flying arrows, all illusions. Now obviously most of us will continue moving around without panicking. Probably. But Zeno's paradoxes still matter because they reveal something important. Reality is not always as simple as it seems. Sometimes the world makes sense to our eyes, but becomes deeply weird the moment we analyze it closely. And honestly, that might be the most philosophical feeling of all. Subscribe for more interesting philosophical stories. Thank you.